So there are more and more AI generative companies coming online and launching services and websites where they are seemingly scraping the internet for any piece of copyrighted piece of music they can get their hands on, they can get their AI algorithm on, training their AI models on that music, and then releasing these text to finished pieces of music models. They're extremely impressive and they do some amazing things. But of course, the question for all of us that create music is, can they do that? Is that legal? Are they violating copyright law by allowing an AI model to train off of our music? It's actually an open question right now. We have not gotten official ruling or a court or a judgment to determine this yet. There's many lawsuits being thrown around all over the place right now. But what I want to do in this video is give you guys my best argument for why I don't feel that they're going to be able to get away with this. Maybe not broadly. There might be some use cases where they can argue that they can, but I'm going to really just focus on music and basically AI models training off of essentially Spotify and every piece of music that's ever existed online. I'm going to argue why these companies might be in some legal jeopardy in the near future. So if you work at one of these companies and you've never been aware of this argument or you've never seen this information before, sorry to maybe burst your bubble. This is something that you probably should have been aware of before you spent hours and maybe your money and time investing into a company that's on shaky legal grounds. But for whatever it's worth, hopefully this presentation helps all of you guys get a better understanding, at least from my point of view, on where I see the challenges for these AI generative companies, especially, like I said, when it comes to music. So basically what all these AI companies right now are betting on is that they're going to be able to get away with the fair use clause. So essentially with copyright law, we have something called fair use, which basically means we do want to grant rights holders, copyright owners of music and songs with certain exclusive rights that they get to have access to, and they get to decide a limited range of things that can happen with their music or not. But we don't want to shut down creativity for all of our citizens and for all people. So we have something called fair use, where basically people who didn't create the music can do stuff with that music in a limited fashion to inspire themselves to create, derivative works of art, to inspire themselves to make some more beautiful pieces of music, whatever it is. And this is what we're all doing, myself included. We are all listening to other people's music throughout our lives, getting inspired by it, a lot of times borrowing from it, trying not to rip them off, trying not to use the exact words, the lyrics, melodies, chord progressions that we've heard before. But of course, we don't live in a vacuum. We are all swimming in the music and the ideas of other people that came before us. So this is what fair use is all about. It's about allowing people to remain creative while also protecting the rights of the people who created the original music. So there are essentially 4 aspects of fair use that we need to make sure that we are familiar with, and only one of them is really going to be the one I think will be the linchpin kind of death nail for a lot of these generative AI companies. We'll, of course, see what happens in the future. But the 4 that we need to be aware of is, number 1, whatever you're doing in terms of creating a derivative work off of an established piece of music, are you creating something that's going to be made for the commercial value, basically for profit in the marketplace, or are you just using it for nonprofit educational purposes? This is a factor, right? Well, every AI generative music model that's out there is either charging right now in a commercial sense, or they probably will be in the very near future. So check on that they're basically using the data and the information they're getting from copyrighted music to create a commercial product that they're obviously going to use for profit. So that's definitely one strike against them in terms of it qualifies. Doesn't necessarily, you don't have to, just because something's commercial doesn't mean that it's automatically a copyright infringement, but it definitely is sort of putting more weight on that side of the argument. They are definitely making a profit from copyrighted music, but that's not the entire picture at all. Number 2 is the nature of the copyrighted work. This just basically means it can't be like an idea or something abstract. It has to be a tangible thing, a tangible medium that people can actually, in the real world, objective world, both point to and say, hey, there's a piece of music. Check on that too. If they're scraping Spotify or scraping anything, Apple Music, I don't know where, if they're scraping anything that's copyrighted, it's an actual objective piece of copyrighted work. So that one checks as well. How close it is to the original work, this is one of those things where it's very subjective. You guys have heard of all these copyright lawsuits. Ed Sheeran was in one recently where it's like, hey, your music sounds just like my hit song from back in the 70s. And, we kind of go back and forth, and sometimes there's disagreements and what's too close and what's not, it's not ripping people off. But we generally all agree to this, that like you can't come out with the exact same hook as Justin Bieber, put it on your track and think, no, I thought of that before he did. That's some abstract, argument you'll never be able to get away with in a court of law. So we sort of agree that like it can't be extremely too close to what the original work is. So AI models are generally good at this. There are sometimes in some of the models that I've used where it sounds extremely close, but it's not right on with the original one. But again, this is one of these kind of gray areas where it'll be a case by case scenario. Okay. Number 4 is really the only one that I think makes the biggest difference for my argument for why I don't think they're going to get away with a fair use defense. It's the potential effect on the marketplace or the value of the copyrighted work, right? So if you do something, you imitate, emulate, train an AI model on a piece of copyrighted music, and you create this new product service commercially that could potentially disrupt or harm the commercial or marketplace value of the original copyrighted music that you trained off of, you are definitely now stepping into the deeper waters of committing copyright infringement, okay? So that's really what I want to go through with this presentation. It's really a quick one, okay? It's really a 2-slide presentation. Don't worry, we're not going back to school. This isn't law school. I can make this very simple for all of us, okay? Right now, the biggest pushback, and I even kind of was feeling this way at the very beginning of all this, is, well, Jesse, you know that AI models are doing exactly what human beings do, right? Human beings, as I mentioned before, we listen to music, we get inspired by it, and then we create music. Well, that's all AI algorithms are doing. They're just absorbing the music. They're not storing it. They're not basically putting it in their, AI algorithm. They're just learning how melodies work, how chord progressions work, how lyrics rhyme, right? They're just learning these kind of patterns essentially throughout all this really complex data called a song, storing those algorithms, those really fancy equations and those relationships, and then they're able to basically spit that out on the other end of it. So isn't that exactly what human beings are doing? They're definitely doing the same thing we are. If we don't want to get sued for, copyright infringement by being inspired by our favorite artists, then why should we think that an AI model or company who's basically, marketing one is going to get sued for doing exactly what human beings do? I'll explain to you why in this video, okay? On the left side of this column, we're going to talk about what human beings are doing when they're creating music and being inspired by other tracks and using fair use, versus on the right side, it'll be what AI models are doing when they're training, off of music and how they're sort of affecting the original value of the copyright, okay? So when humans do it, when we all do it, we call it learning, or we're getting inspired by copyrighted music. So I listen to a great rock song. I'm inspired to now make a rock song. I might even use it as a reference track, but I got to make sure that, again, I'm creating my own interpretation of it. It's got to be really my own thing that doesn't sound exactly like theirs. It's got to be different enough, right? I've talked about this channel on this channel a million times by using reference tracks. We're all doing it, and I highly recommend you guys do it because it helps you get better as a producer much faster than trying to figure it out all on your own. Just learn from people that have done it before you, and obviously follow in their footsteps. Now, when AI does this, they just call it training on copyrighted music, but generally it's more or less kind of the same thing. They're just sort of going, this is the music, go learn about how it's doing what it's doing, and we'll maybe put some text metadata associated with some of those tracks so that you can now kind of piece together and create these relationships in your algorithm for music and text descriptions and marrying them together so that we can actually create a text to music model, right? So kind of the same thing, just different terms of how we're doing it, of course. Now, if I were to write something that's way too close to that original rock track with the vocals and the melody and the lyrics and everything, I could get sued by that original copyright owner, the publisher, the songwriter, anybody who basically has exclusive rights over that song. And they can say, hey, Jesse, you really stepped too close and we're suing you for that. Absolutely. And we also agree that if an AI model does the same thing, so it pumps out a track that's just like some artist that it trained off of, that original artist has every right to go to that AI model and say, hey, you generated something that's basically ripping me off. I'm suing you for damages, or I'm suing you for just, a cease and desist, whatever that might be. But we kind of all already have this kind of built into our copyright law where it's like, yeah, we get it. If you rip anybody off, doesn't matter if an AI does it or a human being does it, somebody's going to get sued for doing that. Okay, we're all clear. Everything's about the same so far. Here's where things get different, okay? How much music can you and I create if we were to go listen to that rock song or a Beatles song or a Blink-182 song? How many songs could we, as a single human being in our home studios, realistically create in a day? Right now, with technology, it's, for me, probably maybe one. And when I mean create, I mean you'd have to write the track, record it, mix and master it. Okay, so the whole track has to be done because that's what AI models can do in 30 seconds now, right? They write it, they create it, it's mixed and mastered to the best of its ability, and it's done in 30 seconds. So we'd have to kind of see what could we do in a 24-hour period, right? Well, I could probably create one track if I'm just extremely on fire that day. I got a ton of caffeine. I'm not taking breaks. I'm probably not breaking for lunch or dinner or anything like that. I have no other responsibilities. That's all I'm going to do. If I'm extremely prolific, maybe 2 tracks a day. Okay, some of you guys maybe are faster, but I mean, honestly, I'm usually about like 1 track every 2 to 3 days. It's not something I can usually finish, especially with vocals and lyrics. Like that's a much more complicated process. Okay, how fast and how much output could an AI model create in a 24-hour period? You guys probably already know the answer to this. Infinite. That's why I highlighted it, made it a little bit bigger. Okay, an AI generative model can be used by virtually unlimited numbers of users simultaneously. It's a digital copy of itself, right? And it takes 30 seconds to sometimes pump out 1 or 2 tracks. So it can all day long, and for an infinite number of people, be cranking out millions, billions of songs literally in a 24-hour period. If enough people are using it, enough people are prompting it, it is basically an infinite supply because it's all digital. It's not coming from an individual human brain that can't be duplicated and replicated. It is coming from a digital computer that can be replicated and duplicated and spread infinitely across the entire globe instantly and infinitely, essentially, in a 24-hour period. Okay, that's where the differences start to really exemplify and where I think the fair use clause for AI breaks down immediately. So if I can create 1 track a day, if I'm really doing well, or 2 if I'm like Superman, can I flood the marketplace with similar music to, let's say it's a piece of production music, right? That rock track that I was, following on. Can I flood the market with, I guess I could put out 2 tracks a day. Could you argue that that's going to flood the market with too much similar music to that one, that I could be devaluing the value of that? It's a really hard argument to make, I would say, if I'm only able to create 1 or 2 tracks a day. I'm not making much of a dent in the industry or in the production music library world by my 1 or 2 tracks with it. Okay, so I don't think that you can make any case that a single human being, in the fair use doctrine, being inspired by music and creating 1 track at most per day is doing any damage to the original copyright owner. People are still going to love that, and they might love yours as well, but you're not basically crowding them out by supplying an infinite number of sound-alike tracks that were inspired by theirs, right? You see the difference? And of course, with AI, it can devalue the original copyright, especially for those of us in production music. In the artist world, that might be a different case, but for production music, we obviously are creating something that can be used by TV and film clients. And if a company comes in with their AI model, like literally points their kind of vacuum cleaner over at production music libraries and sucks up all that data and basically trains their AI model and is able to release an infinite number of sound-alike tracks that are just as marketable, just as licensable, because they were trained off of licensable, marketable music. Maybe they're not stepping on any of the copyright toes. They're not directly like any of them, so they're kind of creating their own little versions of them. But they can flood the market with cheaper, infinite options that basically devalue the marketplace value, the actual money value of all that original music that it was trained off of. So this, to me, is a pretty clear case that AI and humans are not doing the same thing when they're training off of music. And it has everything to do with the output. So it's not about the number itself, like just the fact that it can create an infinite number of tracks is not the argument. The fact that that infinite number of tracks can then go supply a marketplace that is going to wash away all the human creators that helped train that AI. That's where I'm now wondering if we even need to amend the copyright laws or the fair use laws, because it seems like this is already violating that part of it anyways. So this is just my take on it. I am not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice, okay? But I just wanted to give you guys, hopefully, that are human composers, creators, some hope. Like I've said, this battle is just getting begun, is just getting started. We haven't even gotten our first, official ruling from a court as to what the fair use doctrine, how the fair use doctrine applies to AI training models. But to me, the writing's on the wall that they are going to face some big problems here in the very near future. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there something I am not seeing? I am learning about this stuff just alongside of all of you guys. So I'm not an expert. I don't have all the answers to all this kind of stuff, but I'm just telling you guys how I see things. So please, let's keep the conversation going. Leave your comments below. I'd love to read what you guys think.